If you lose shelter, you freeze. If you lose water, you die. If you lose your footing in enemy land, you disappear. That's the reality Native American tribes faced every day. They tracked prey across frozen rivers. They read storms by the twitch of an owl. They drew water from dry earth. And they built homes strong enough to outlast blizzards, war, and time. So, here's the question. How did they survive where others fell? What did they know that modern survivalists still chase? And which lessons might just save your life? My name is Sam, and this is Wild America. And today, we're bringing back 7 survival lessons that kept Native American tribes alive and unbeatable. Now, let's start where survival begins. Number 7, shelter. Survival starts with cover. If you've got no roof, then you've got no rest. And native tribes didn't just throw together huts. Not at all. They built armor against the elements. In the deep woods of the Northeast, the Iroquois raised longhouses. Think timber skeletons bent into long ribs, bark skins stretched tight. Dozens slept inside, fires crackling down a central corridor. And if snow piled high outside, it didn't really matter. These heat-trapping bunkers kept families warm with shared breath and smart insulation. They were built to last, through storm, through freeze. And further east, Algonquians worked low and fast. Wigwams? These were basically saplings bent into domes. Bark peeled, reeds woven, tight to the ground, tight to the heat. With wigwams, rain slid off and snow didn't stick. You could build one in a few days using forest scraps. Yeah, it wasn't flashy, but it was clever. You stay low, stay warm, and you stay hidden. And out in the open plains, where the land is flat and you have no cover, the wind there felt like knives. As a result, the Sioux and Cheyenne made teepees. These were fast to pitch and faster to fold. Teepees were basically cones of hide stretched over poles. Smoke flaps played in the wind. It provided heat in winter and airflow in summer. Whole homes rolled and hauled with the herds. These native tribes didn't settle down. They kept moving, and whenever they did, the shelter moved with them. And down in the Southwest, heat kills, water hides. There, the Hopi and Zuni fought back against such challenges. Pueblos, that's right, mud and stone stacked high, walls thick enough to block the noon sun, but warm by dawn. Pueblos were built into cliffs or perched on mesas. Aside from providing proper shelter, pueblos also defended. Heat stayed out, warmth stayed in. And if we move inland to the Great Basin, one day's sun scorched, the next night froze. There, the Shoshone and Paiute didn't overthink it. They built wickiups. Now these were fast, flexible, and disposable. They were dome shelters made from whatever the land threw at them. Brush, grass, bark, no set plan, just instinct, speed, and constant adjustment. And up north, where the wind shrieked and firewood was fantasy, the Inuit built heat out of snow. Igloos. These were spiraled blocks that were stacked tight. You see, snow trapped body heat and blocked the Arctic rage outside. And inside, there was no fire, just insulation and know-how passed down in silence. So, yeah, who would have thought brutal cold could become shelter, eh? And as you see, shelter for these tribes wasn't decoration. It was survival strategy, tailored to land, built from what was there, and designed to last. Every structure held a lesson. Know your ground. Use what you've got. Build smart. Live smarter. And once you've got cover, you need calories. Time to hunt the forest floor. Number 6, foraging. Now, we're not exactly talking about snacking in the woods here. Foraging meant life or death, and native tribes, they knew the land like the back of their hands. They didn't guess. Plants, roots, berries. Each had a season, a use, and a risk if you got it wrong. In the Pacific Northwest, for instance, Salish and Lakapamuck's women hunted camas bulbs, but only the right kind. One mistake, and you'd grab the deadly version. They timed the harvest to the bloom, dug them up with deer antler tools, and then slow-cooked them in stone-lined pits, turning the tough inulin inside into sugar you could actually digest. And what they didn't eat, they dried and stored, or traded. To them, camas was currency. And up in Alaska, the Upper Tanana Athabascans lived on berries such as lingon, crow, and bear. They ate them raw, mashed them with grease, or cached them in frozen birch-lined pits. They also dug up Eskimo potatoes. Not real potatoes, these were wild tubers packed with vitamin C. You could also eat them raw, or roast them. Either way, they helped you survive long, dark winters. And out on the plateau, the Nez Perce and Yakima timed their foraging like a clock. Bitterroot was usually foraged in spring, cleaned and prepped to kill the taste. Summer meant huckleberries, serviceberries, all sun-dried into tough cakes. Then, come fall, it was couse root season. Carbs in dirt form, earth oven cooked, always working with the land's pace. And down in the Southwest, the Apache and Navajo turned cactus into dinner. These prickly pear pads were de-spined and cooked like greens. The fruit, however, was scooped and eaten fresh, or turned into jam. Even the cactus had tricks, helping with wounds, settling guts. Furthermore, the Great Plains tribes like the Lakota and Cheyenne dug wild onions and prairie turnips in summer. These were peeled, eaten raw, or dried for later. Prairie turnips were wondrous survival food. So yeah, when meat ran dry, these kept people going. Back east, however, in the forests, the Iroquois and Cherokee chased fats and proteins. Acorns were everywhere, but bitter. So they soaked them, rinsed the tannins, then ground the nuts into flour. As for hickory nuts, they were smashed and boiled into a thick, oily milk. It was dense, high energy, perfect for cold months. So, yeah, the wild gave, if you knew how to ask. And you know you can stretch a meal, but you can't fake a drink. Number 5. Water. No clean water? You're dead in 3 days. Native tribes knew that, and they planned for it. To them, every drop mattered, and every method had to work. In the dry Southwest, the Hohokam built water instead of waiting for the rain. They dug canals by hand, miles of them. Some ran over 130 miles, rerouting rivers to feed their fields. They had no machines, just skill and teamwork. And nearby, the Tohono O'odham farmed in floodplains. They waited for flash floods, then planted crops where the ground stayed damp. They called it Akchin, low-tech but high payoff. And when rivers ran dry, they didn't panic. They simply dug into the sand. You see, dry creek beds weren't always dry underneath. Dig deep enough and the water would bleed up slow. Enough for a cup, enough to make it one more day. And in forests and mountains, native tribes read the signs. Birds flying low, bugs swarming, willow trees growing strong. All of that meant water, springs, streams, hidden seeps. They tracked animals and followed the plants. Nature always left clues if you knew where to look. And when they found it, they made it safe. If the stream ran clear, they drank. If not, they filtered using sand, charcoal, or pine bark. Some even used silver containers, which killed off the microbes without even knowing the word. The Navajo tribe, in particular, used clay pots sealed with pine resin, old-school tech that still works today. At dawn, they'd crouch low and press moss to the stones. You see, dew clung to rock and leaf like it didn't want to let go. The Navajo would squeeze every drop from the morning chill. And in heat-heavy lands, they made the sun work for them by digging a pit, lining it with bark, and then piling in leaves or damp dirt. Afterward, they'd cover it. Let the sun sweat it out. It'll provide a trickle of clean drops. Yeah, it's not much, but sometimes a few sips meant seeing tomorrow. And if there were no stream in sight, they'd chew desert roots like agave, yucca, or anything thick with juice. Again, it's not tasty, but it kept the tongue wet, and it kept the body upright. Now, rainwater was gold. The natives caught it in hides, baskets, or clay jars. In dry grasslands, for instance, they'd tie cloth to their legs and walk through the morning dew. They would then wring it out. It's tedious work, yeah, but once again, it kept them alive. Natives also filled deer stomachs and hung them like canteens. In this method, water didn't slosh, didn't spill, didn't rot. It wasn't clean, but it was water, and that was enough. Also, thanks to native tribes, we learned that bees don't roam far from water. So if you see them, there's water close. Follow the buzz, follow the ants. They know the way, better than you do. To most natives, if not all, water was sacred. The Cherokee called the river Long Man, which meant head in the hills, feet in the ocean. They bathed in it for cleansing their souls as much as their physical bodies. It was purely ritual. And by the way, if you want more of the old wild, remember that we've got plenty of episodes on brutal winters, backcountry wounds, and the men who did and didn't make it out. But in the meantime, you've got food. You've got water. Now, let's talk about what's on your back. Number 4, clothing. Native tribes usually built their gear to fight the cold, to cut through brush, to move fast, and to stay alive. Every stitch had a reason. Every hide had a purpose. This was field-tested, battle-ready gear, so good that mountain men stole the blueprint. Up north in the brutal Arctic, the Inuit and Yupik dressed to avoid death. Caribou hides, which were light, hollow-haired, and heat-trapping, became parkas, pants, and mittens. Furthermore, sealskin blocked wind and water. These were perfect for boots. And out on the plains, tribes like the Lakota and Cheyenne wore buckskin. This was basically deerskin that was scraped and softened. With this, they made shirts, leggings, and moccasins. It breathed easy, shed rain fast, and didn't snag in the brush. Fringes were functional. Rain rolled off them. Water dried quicker. Buckskin blended into the land too, breaking up your outline when stalking game. And what did you know? Frontiersmen copied it fast. They had to. And in the northeast forests, where the weather flipped and the woods were dense, the Iroquois and Algonquin used deerskin too, but layered it. To them, it was thin for speed and thick for warmth. Also, moccasins gave hunters silence, helping them slip through leaves like ghosts. Then in the southwest, where the days cooked and nights froze, the Navajo and Hopi turned to cotton and later wool. They spun it into breathable shirts and thick blankets, stacking layers or stripping them, depending on the sun. And out on the soggy northwest coast, the Tlingit and Haida made use of what they had, softened cedar bark and mountain goat wool. These bark skirts and wool robes handled constant rain and biting air. And once you're wrapped and ready, the next step is to bring home the meat. Number 3, hunting. Now, before rifles, before horses, before roads, there was the hunt. And for native tribes, it was warfare. And out on the plains, the prize was bison. 1-ton tanks with hooves. Bison were fast, furious, and impossible for a lone man to bring down. So the tribes didn't go solo. They went tactical. The buffalo jump was the crown jewel. It didn't require any bullets, just brain and sweat. The plan was to drive a stampede off a cliff. It was clean and effective. And here's how it worked. First, a young, fast, and fearless decoy would dress in a bison hide. He'd then creep low through the grass. He would mimic a lost calf. a cry the herd couldn't ignore. And it was that sound that drew them in, stirring their instincts. And behind the herd, the real push came. Hunters in wolfskins would rush forward, cracking robes and snapping branches, driving panic into muscle. They would fan out in a V, guiding the herd down narrowing lanes lined with stones, brush, whatever worked, to a single fate: the cliff, or as the natives called, the Pishkun. The first bison would hit the edge too fast to stop. The rest followed. Then gravity would do the killing. But it was risky. One slip by the decoy, one nervous bull turning early, and the whole herd scattered. That means you got nothing. But if it worked, you had meat for months, hides for shelter, bones for tools, sinew for string. So yeah, one jump could sustain a village. And if there are no cliffs, then no problem. Tribes built impounds, which were huge corrals of timber and brush, some 15 feet high. They spread out long chutes to imitate the cliff run. Again, same bait, same pressure, drive the bison in, then close the gap. Arrows did the rest. Timing had to be perfect, however. The walls had to hold. A panicked bull could crash through if the setup wasn't right. The hunters had to move like one mind. One wrong move, and the herd bolted. George Catlin, who spent years documenting tribal life in the 1800s, said it best. They have learned the habits of the bison so well that they govern the herd, not with brute strength, but by mimicking its language. And up in the Rockies, where the Tukudika, also known as the sheep eaters, roamed, the prey was bighorn sheep. These were fast and jumpy animals, masters of the cliffs. You couldn't chase them. You had to outsmart them. So the Tukudika built spiral traps, which were stone walls or thick brush twisted down slopes like a funnel. Hunters came from above, spooking the sheep upward into the narrowing spiral. And at the center, a dead end. One ledge, one final move. The kill was quick, clean, and quiet. And in the marshlands near Nevada's Lovelock Cave, the game was birds. And the trick was bait. Tribes crafted duck decoys from reeds and feathers. These were so lifelike they fooled the real thing. Hunters floated them on still water, then hid in reed blinds or submerged themselves entirely. Only their bows or blowpipes broke the surface. And once a duck flew in, it didn't fly out. Some of those decoys are over 2,000 years old, perfected long before Europe ever saw a musket. And no part of the kill was wasted. Bones became tools, needles, hooks, handles, tendons turned into bowstrings, stomachs carried water. And nothing relied on gadgets, no scopes, no rangefinders, just instinct, silence, and environmental mastery. These were survival blueprints in their finest. And hey, if this hooked you, don't miss our other deep dives into real frontier survival. So be sure to check out our channel for more interesting episodes. As for now, the hunt's done. But can you read the sky? Can you find your way before the storm? Number 2, navigation and weather. In the wild sprawl of North America, native tribes knew exactly where they were going, and they knew what was coming. Let's start with direction. Long before maps, compasses, or GPS, native tribes bent young hardwoods into trail markers. They forced the trees to grow with sharp angles, unnatural curves pointing toward water, shelter, or sacred ground. You could spot them even in thick brush or snow. These were signposts, planted with intent. They were meant to last generations. As for weather, if you lived on the plains or in the Arctic, guessing wrong could kill you. So tribes watched everything: the wind, the sky, the animals, and they learned what patterns meant trouble. The Omaha listened for the curlew's call at dawn. If it cried, skies stayed clear. The Sioux took the screech of a gray owl as a warning. it meant freeze is coming. Foggy mornings usually meant cold, and storms soon. Thin corn husks or loose bark, this meant mild winter ahead. But if muskrats rushed to build heavy homes, or if birds and bugs swarmed early, or if buffalo grass dropped heavy seeds, then brace yourself for a long, brutal winter coming on the way. Northern tribes believed animal coats told the truth. If fur came in thick and fast, so would snow. Even the stars mattered. The Osage read comets and planets like signs in the sky, looking for what was written ahead. And in the Arctic, the Inuit didn't need trees or stars. They read wind patterns, studied the shape of snowdrifts, or sastrugi as they called it, and tracked birds and caribou. Where animals moved, food followed. And so did they. For tribes like the Chugach in Alaska, watching the sky was a matter of life and death. They tracked clouds, wind changes, and animal behavior. Birds flying low or marine life fleeing inland? Storm coming? No debate. Native tribes read the seasons like a living clock, and each tribe had its own markers. The first cry of the nighthawk? Spring's here, time to hunt buffalo. Lakota called May's first full moon the planting moon. That's when the ground spoke yes to seeds. And when buck antlers swelled, it meant berries and chokecherries were ready. By the August moon, cherries and wild plums hung ripe and fat. And up in the northeast, tribes used weather sticks, rods of balsam or birch stuck outside. When the air got damp, the wood curled down, and when it dried, it twisted up. Simple, reliable. The Meskwaki spun all of these survival tactics into stories, tales that taught kids when storms rolled in or when the frost would bite. Their myths were basically survival manuals. Some tribes even believed people could nudge the weather. For instance, in the Southwest, rituals aimed to call rain. The Kansa, calling themselves the Wind People, had their own blizzard-banishing trick. They'd cover the youngest son in red paint and roll him across the snow, marking a trail to end the storm. And for those who think oral tradition was all they had, think again. On the northern plains, winter count keepers recorded history in pictures, marked into buffalo hides. Each winter, a single event marked the year. Those hides stacked up into timelines spanning centuries. This was study, observation, a tight bond with land, sky, and time. Native weather sense was hyperlocal, honed, and often more accurate than anything you'd find on a radar today. And since reading the sky might tell you when, reading the ground, this tells you everything else. Number 1. Tracking. Native American trackers read the land like a book. For instance, a snapped twig wasn't random. A scuffed rock told a story. Every mark meant something. For tribes across North America, tracking was survival. Hunt, evade, scout, survive. You learned to read signs or you didn't last long. Take footprints, for example. A skilled tracker sized the animal, studied its gait, figured how fast it was moving, even how long ago it passed. Damp soil, sharp edges, that meant it's still fresh. Dry and crumbling? Too late. Some native trackers could even date a trail by sniffing horse dung. No joke. But it went deeper. Position of urine inside a horse track? That told you if the rider was male or female, because women usually rode mares. Now that level of detail meant life or death. The best trackers adjusted by terrain: snow, sand, rock, forest. Each one changed how prints looked and faded. A mark in the snow might vanish in an hour with sun. Wet leaves could hold shape longer. You had to adapt fast. Shadow wolves from the Tohono O'odham Nation mastered this. They'd cut for sign, looking for the tiniest clue. A fiber snagged on a bush, a shimmer where dust was brushed away. These were cold reads indeed. Tracking, after all, wasn't just a job. It was a code. You had to move with the woods, with the land. You showed respect to the land and the life on it. Some called it spiritual, others called it discipline. Either way, it worked. And when Europeans hit American soil, most of them were lost. Cold, hungry, surrounded by woods they didn't understand. Many didn't make it. The ones who did? They survived by teaming up with native tribes, learning to hunt, track, and move through the land without getting killed. Over time, those settlers picked up the skill. They started reading tracks for themselves, whether they were chasing deer or watching for raiding parties. And when the fighting came, tracking turned tactical. You got hit? You didn't wait around. You followed the enemy's trail through brush, mud, snow, until you caught up and struck back. By the 1600s and 1700s, that mix of frontier grit and native know-how caught the British Army's attention. You see, their redcoats weren't built for guerrilla warfare. So they formed colonial ranger units, irregulars who fought dirty, tracked hard, and knew the wild like the back of their hand. These men were hunters, scouts, ambushers, not parade ground soldiers. Men like Robert Rogers rewrote the rules, literally, with his Rules of Ranging, laying down the foundation for modern special ops. And it wasn't just settlers. Native scouts kept serving, on all sides, through all wars. They tracked for the Union and the Confederacy. They fought in Mexico chasing Pancho Villa. And in World War II, they became code talkers, blending ancient tongues with modern tactics to outsmart enemies across the globe. Frederick Russell Burnham, one of the best-known scouts of his time, learned from native trackers. But he didn't just study tracks, he studied culture, traditions, beliefs, superstitions. Because real tracking isn't only about footprints, you had to understand the world those prints came from. You can't follow a ghost if you don't know what haunts it. The last official native scout retired in 1947, but the skill didn't disappear. Combat tracking, such as learning the enemy's movements, anticipating their next steps, and striking before they strike. This is still alive, still sharp, still deadly. The bottom line is, tracking is ancient. It predates speech. Early humans followed animals long before they knew words. And that instinct stuck. It evolved, and for the tribes who mastered it, it became an edge, one that kept them fed, safe, and alive. So the next time you're cold, lost, or dry, ask yourself, would you make it? Or perhaps the question isn't whether you could survive like they did, but whether you'd even know where to start or not. And if you like this episode, then don't forget, we've got more on our channel, wild, real, and just as brutal.